city had remained behind me like a gray cloud of fog. My car's headlights briefly illuminated the dried pine trees along the roadside, then abandoned them once again to adopt bottomless darkness. The Grand Aurora Hotel rose atop the hill like the skeleton of a giant. This Victorian-era structure looked as if it hadn't sprouted from the earth, but rather had fallen here from the sky like a tumor. When I stepped inside, I felt as Dot, though. The lobby's massive ceiling was about to collapse onto me. The marble floors weren't cracked by the weight of those who walked on them, but Dot as if by the breathing of something beneath them. The reception desk resembled a docked coffin made of ebony wood, flawless, without a single speck of dust upon it. The receptionist slowly lifted his head. His skin was so thin that I could Dot see every pulse of the veins beneath it. He had no whites in his eyes, only a dull ember dot glow. "Room 407, he said, his vocal cords sounding as if they were lined with sandpaper as he handed me the key. His fingers brushed my wrist. In that moment, I felt an icy needle crawling upward through my veins. This wasn't just Dot cold. It was the absorption of all warmth related to life by that man. "We have one rule," he added, without moistening his dried lips. "When you look through the peephole, never speak to what you see. It is only a reflection." The elevator's rusty metal cage ascended, creaking as if it were breaking someone's bones on every floor. When the doors opened on the 4th floor, the end of the corridor was nowhere in sight. This place had a length that defied the laws of physics. The lights flickered rhythmically, like the final breaths of a dying creature. As I walked toward my Dot room, number 407, I stopped in front of 408 D-door, Wasson T. Wooden. Like the others, it was pitch black, charred, with a texture that looked as though it would leave a mark. On your fingers, if touched, deep grooves covered its surface, as if someone had carved it with their nails. From beneath the door seeped not thin smoke, but gray dust. The smell of this dust resembled that of a 1,000-year-old library and a freshly pulled tooth. When I entered my room, I locked the door behind me 3 times. But locks in this hotel were only an illusion. Lying on the bed, I noticed the cracks on the ceiling slowly shifting places. They were merging to form a gigantic face on the ceiling. Every time I tried to close my eyes, the absolute, sticky silence of the room forced them open in terror. Then the sound began. Tick, tick. The sound wasn't coming from the wall, but directly from beneath my pillow, as if someone were counting the springs inside the bed one by one, bending them with their fingers. I jumped out of bed. I tried to turn on the light, but the switch came off in my hand. Instead of electricity, black, sticky blood poured out of the switch. I turned toward the peephole. The receptionist's warning echoed in my ears. Never speak. When I pressed my eye to the lens, I saw that the corridor had completely changed. The carpets were gone. Instead, a path made of human tongues, stitched together, stretched across the floor. The door to room 408 was wide open. What emerged from inside was not human. It was a shadow whose height reached the ceiling of the corridor, its arms dragging along the floor. But this shadow had physical muss. Wherever it passed, it melted the wallpaper, revealing the pink, wet tissue beneath. The shadow stopped directly in front of my door. It bent down. It had no face, only a mask covered in thousands of tiny holes. From those holes, small, transparent tentacles extended outward, caressing the surface of my door. "I know," said the shadow. Its voice sounded like the final rattle of someone dying, but the words were clear. "I can feel the softness of the skin inside. Your bones will become the new pillars of this building." As I recoiled in terror, my foot caught on something. The suitcase on the floor was no longer a suitcase. It had transformed into a leather bag with a mouth, and it was eating my shoes. Every object in the room was in the grip of a paranormal mutation. The chair bent like a kneecap, Dot, and the curtains dangled like severed arms. Suddenly, the walls split apart, along with a purple, sickly light flooding into the room. I found myself inside room 408. This was not a room, it was a cathedral, but instead of stone, bone was husid. Instead of glass, frozen tears. At the day center, standing on alto high pulpit, was the architect. He wore armor made of thousands of keys. Every time he moved, the sound of those keys clashing echoed like the chains of thousands of prisoners. "Welcome, room 407, said the architect, raising the massive needle in his hand. "This hotel is not a prison. It is a hive. We gather the souls of people from the outside world here, so we can patch the torn places of reality. You will be the strongest thread of the night." When he aimed the needle in my chest, I saw my body unravel, thread by thread. My blood did not flow. Instead, my consciousness, memories, and pain were drawn from my body like smoke. My first day of elementary school, my mother's scent, the name of my first love. All of them gathered at the tip of the needle and were stitched into the pink tissue lining the hotel's walls. I no longer felt like a whole. I was now inside every particle of dust on the 4th floor Dot of the Grand Aurora. One part of me was in the rusty key at the reception, another in the Dot-burnt smell of the door to room 408. When the architect drove the needle in one final time, Dot pain gave way to absolute emptiness. I was no longer afraid, because there was no longer a me left to fear. Now, I am writing these lines to you from inside the severed telephone cables on the 4th floor of Dot, the Grand Aurora. You are currently in the lobby. The receptionist is smiling at you. The number 407 on the key in your hand is not actually my room number. It is my new name. When you go up to your room, please do not look through the peephole, because if you do, you will see your own funeral there. And I will be the only one crying at that funeral, your lips. When the architect's needle pierced my soul, the floor opened beneath me, like a mouth. Everything solid, liquefied, concrete, turned into bone broth. Where I fell was worse than even the suffocating corridors of the 4th floor. This was the dark cell of the hotel's digestive system. This was not a basement. This was an underground labyrinth where the sky had never existed, where even stones groaned in pain. From thousands of chains hanging from the ceiling were suspended the former ones, whose not only names but shapes had been stolen. They were no longer human. They had become living machines that heated the building, transformed into the hotel's plumbing pipes, with rusty water flowing from their mouths. Help. I heard a whisper. A woman tangled in one of the chains looked at me. Her face half transformed into a wall clock. In place of her pupils, seconds were rewinding rapidly. Time does not flow here, she said, her voice sounding like clock gears grinding against each other. Here, we only erode. The architect planted us here to feed reality. Every scream of ours seeps into the dreams of the guests above. As I walked deeper into the darker corridors, Dot of the cellar, each room revealed itself as a different chamber of paranormal torture. In one room, thousands of hands emerged from the walls, stitching something into the void. In another, tongueless men were writing the hotel's daily newspaper with their own blood. "Stop!" said a voice. From the darkness emerged a figure whose body was made entirely of shards of glass. This was the hotel's first Onatha, architect's first victim, in every piece of glass. On his body, a moment of terror from a different hotel room played like a living film. A man drowning in room 212, a woman swallowed by her own reflection in room 305. "The architect is not a god," said the glass man. Every vibration in his voice caused a piece of glass in his body to crack. He's just a parasite. This hotel is a tear in the fabric of the universe. The architect needs new threads to keep this tear open. If you find the first brick at the very bottom of the cellar, you can end this nightmare. But that brick is made from your heart. When I reached the deepest point of the cellar, I found a vast void before me. At its center, a single red brick floated in the air. The brick pulsed like a heart. With every beat, the hotel walls trembled, and the scream of a new victim echoed through the corridors above. The architect appeared beside me, gliding out of the darkness like a shadow. The massive needle in his hand emitted a purple glow in the cellar's dim light. "Do you want to touch it?" Dot asked the architect. "That brick was kneaded with all your loves, hatreds, and hopes from before you came here. If you pull it out, the hotel will collapse, but you'll also be erased, as if you never existed. Never born, never loved, never suffered. Absolute nothingness. Or will you continue to exist forever, even in pain, as a part of this cellar?" I reached out to the warm, beating brick. The moment my fingers touched it, my entire life flooded my mind. Like a film reel, but like a dot explosion. From my first breath to the final moment, I walked through the hotel doors. "Everything," the architect screamed. The thousands of keys forming his armor began to turn at once. All the former ones in the cellar, all the mute victims and chained souls cried out together. Thought this was not a scream of pain, it was a symphony of freedom. "We are not materials," I shouted. My voice shattered the flesh-like walls of the cellar. The moment I tore the brick from its place, the Grand Aurora began to collapse. The pink-textured walls of the fourth floor melted away. The faceless man at the reception torn it. The door to room 408 collapsed inward, swallowing the architect like a black hole. When I opened my eyes, there was no cellar and no hotel. I was sitting behind the steering wheel of my car, on the side of a desolate road. On the hill where the Grand Aurora should have stood, there was only a burned, pitch-black wasteland. I looked at the back of my hand. There, just beneath my skin, was a small stitch mark. It glowed with a purple, paranormal shimmer. Had I escaped? Or had the architect sent me into the outside world as his agent? I looked in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, among the shadows, I saw a pair of unburglared eyes starting at me. The receptionist's voice whispered in the wind. "You have checked in, but your checkout process has not yet been completed.